Hello and welcome along to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. It's Daniel here and joined alongside me once again by my brother Sean.
How's it going?
And not too bad, yeah. So after the long weekend, we've decided to cover a few different topics on this show here. We're just going to talk about the lack of League of Ireland coverage and obviously the great results tonight and over the across the week for Bohemians, Shamrock Rovers, and Dundalk. We want to talk a little bit about why that's not being covered on any Irish TV station this week and whether the second legs will be or not, and just have we ever really given a fair chance of the League of Ireland. And we'll also talk a little bit about some of the Olympic sports like athletics, for example, that most of us only tune in every 4 years when they're shown on RT, and why is that the case as well. So there's a few different topics to discuss. Sean, you want to have a quick word on today and some of the transfer dealings there, no less than Lionel Messi and Jack Grealish?
Yeah, I think it was a busy couple of hours. But I think that the weird thing with Twitter and rumors and stuff, I think everyone saw a lot of these things coming. The thing with Messi is, I think the Barcelona are kind of saying that it's to do with the La Liga policy and the kind of the salary caps that they do have there. But I do think it'd be interesting to see what happened. I mentioned, I'd say a couple of weeks ago on the podcast about PSG and the Qatar World Cup happening in a year, and then almost like they're building the Galacticos in time for that. Um, Obviously with the money with Qatar that put into the PSG, so it'll be just interesting to see what happens with there. I think if he is to leave, there is to be no way back from at Barca. I definitely think that's the club with an Argentina manager with the likes of Neymar, and obviously Paris being a very nice city to live in. The Grealish one, I think, is very interesting, and be very interested to see what happens to Harry Kane now. 150 million euro, I think, has been touted at. It's kind of bizarre money for a player that probably City don't necessarily overly need, and I think it's only gonna add to the Premier League this season. So uh, it's just gonna be interesting to see what happens and how it plays out and how the Harry Kane saga plays out. But it's good for City that they've got it over the line, considering there's a month left in the window.
Yeah, and then the Kane deal, like that could, like I personally don't know if that'll happen or not, but it's interesting, and obviously the amount of money in City and PSG, like you said, it's kind of going the same way, and Chelsea obviously too are spending a lot of money. It's kind of football's going in a certain direction, so hopefully you can keep the competitiveness. But look, Sean, I wanted to focus this week on the League of Ireland and the TV coverage, and a lot of people aren't happy with the lack of coverage. Now, before this week, notwithstanding the results, you would have looked at these games and gone, Bohemians in the Aviva, what a fantastic background. We already have our studio there. Surely we can show this game on RT or any other station, and that didn't happen. I read Stephen Bradley saying that the Shamrock Rovers game, that game to RT was offered, or RT had offered to show it, but it had to be shown at 5 o'clock. And they said, no, we want to show the game at 8 o'clock. And then obviously there's Dundalk as well with an absolutely sensational goal. And the best thing about the streaming services is the goals are doing the rounds straight away, which is brilliant. So if you're out of training or whatever, like I was, straight away in the car, I can see the goal before I drive off. So that bit is good. Like the streaming services are there. Why can't these TV companies show it? Like there's just it doesn't seem to be an appetite. And I'll get into a few other points in this, but to bring you in, Sean, there doesn't seem to be an appetite to grow the League of Ireland in this country. And have we ever given it a proper opportunity?
Yeah, well, I do think that's interesting because I have read a few bits that Bose had kind of were willing to forego what they would get from the streaming service to have it shown on RT. So there obviously is a lot of to and fro, and I think it's hard. I think it always is hard the year of an Olympics and also a major tournament. There's been a lot of sport on TV, but I think it was Kieran Murphy in the Irish Independent or in the Irish Times that was saying, for the last however many weeks you've got the underage GA championships going on, and it's kind of wall to wall on that. So there is still an option. I think the thing that would annoy you is, like, especially with Bowes. I mean, this I think third week in the trot in the Aviva, and it's been kind of coming our third time in the last few weeks playing in there. And when they got when they had the last win to play PAOK, a big side from Greece, which you look at some of the players on show. You also look at some of the kind of the figures and stats around it. It's quite interesting, and you definitely thought in the Aviva Stadium it'd be a massive game to show. But look, I think RTE have been kind of proven over a number of years that they don't like to push out the boat. And the thing with RTE is they only do have 2 channels, and it maybe is something for them going forward with the amount of sport that is on RT and the amount of sport they have the rights for. Is there a potential for a sports channel solely on that, or what can happen with that? Because you can do a lot around the League of Ireland now. I know there's no more Soccer Republic, but you could do a sort of a Sunday game style show for the League of Ireland. You've got obviously your Gaelic games, rugby, so there is a massive opportunity there for them. But I mean, they aren't in a financially strong position either. So it is a really interesting dynamic. But if for anyone who's seen the scenes at the Aviva Stadium over the last couple of weeks, I mean, it's been unbelievable, and the fact that it hasn't been brought on terrestrial TV is probably a real shame. And also the thing is that there is a limited capacity for these games. I mean, the tickets have gone on general sale. I think the last couple of games have been sold in under 10 minutes. So there's a real appetite for people to not only go to the games but to watch it, and then to have to, I suppose, pay a tenner for the streaming service, you know, when you could have it on your telly, is probably another turn off as well. But it's just an interesting, I mean, it's an interesting debate, but I definitely think it goes to show, you know, where the League of Ireland stands at the moment.
Yeah, and the list of priorities. It's a good point you make that, you know, if this wasn't a pandemic or tickets weren't limited, it would still not be good enough. But the fact is that there are Bow fans there that generally wanted to go to that game and weren't able to watch that game. And this is the point I was actually going to make. And Andrew Blair White's blogs made the comment here that he said there's never been the interest from RT, I'm afraid. A huge week for League of Ireland football and shows the league in good light and will be swept under the carpet by those that matter the most. And another point he was making to me, and it's something like, you watch RT and they have a League of Ireland game that they'll come on air at 7:35. I think I'm right in that. If it's the 7:45 kickoff, they've come on air at 7:35 before, or worse, is it 7:30 and they've come on for 7:35 kickoff back in the day when there were 7:35 kickoffs? It's just, you know, and 5 minutes of coverage at the end. Why is there no 7 o'clock build up? Why was Soccer Republic on a Monday night? Like, it's like an RT. The official word to the likes of Bohemians is that we don't get the viewership. Well, if you half-ass it, that's what's going to happen. You're not going to get people tuning in. But if it's a proper production with the so-called A-team watching it, like, what always pissed me off about RT's coverage, I never saw him and Dunphy do a League of Ireland game. I never saw John Giles do a League of Ireland game, and I never saw Liam Brady do a League of Ireland game. Now, somewhere will say that they did. And in fairness to Richie Sadler, he's always, I presume, putting his hand up to work on the FAI Cup final, which is a good production considering they also have the ladies game. But it's the one a year thing that drives me insane. And they just, whoever's in charge at RT, they've never seemed bothered by the League of Ireland. And as Kieran Murphy's article said, that Cork under 20 footballers have been shown 3 times since the last League of Ireland game on RT. And like, leave the League of Ireland aside, which again should be covered on RT. These are massive Champions League and European games. So there was a Champions League game that Rovers were in 2 weeks ago. Do you know what I mean? And they got it back to 2-2 on aggregate and lost the goal in the last. Like, we should have been shown that, or people should have been tuning in going, Jesus, these are the champions of Ireland. And they weren't a million miles away from getting through in the qualifying round. And the fact is, most people who don't pay the tenner, or like, I'll be honest, like, if I'm out in training, I'm not going to pay a tenner for the last 10 minutes. So I'm keeping up to date on Twitter. It just, to me, it's not good enough. Why can't I come home and just come on and there's a game on? Do you know what I mean? Of a local team here that's literally 5-10 minutes up the road.
I do think that the thing that will annoy people is when Rovers got drawn to, it was AC Milan last year, that it was immediately put on RT. There was also that kind of famous Paddy Power thing where Paddy Power put up a load of kind of their traditional banners, fun Sadar banners. I think that's what will annoy. It's almost as if there needs to be a glamour tie, or there needs to be an Ibrahimovic playing in Tallaght Stadium or whatever it is. And as opposed to, you know, Bohemians or Dundalk or whoever it is getting a really positive result against a really good side at that level, it's not the same as a glamour tie where Rovers lose a couple or 2-0 to an AC Milan or whatever it is. So I think that's definitely something I think a lot of League of Ireland fans do have a massive issue with. And they always, I think a lot of people can accuse them sometimes of having almost like a chip on their shoulder when it comes to this, but I do definitely think it's warranted in their case when, you know, they see, to be honest, I don't remember a night like this or a couple of nights like this where all 3 teams in Europe have had a really successful, really positive results in a time where they probably didn't expect it. And the fact that, like Andrew said there, it's a huge week and it's just going to be swept under the carpet, it is obviously a massive shame, and something that is another just staggering block in probably progressing the league.
And here's one for you, Sean. Like, why aren't UEFA or like RT have to show the Confederations Cup? Do you know what I mean? As part of their sorry, that's FIFA. That's a bad example. But the point being, they show the Super Cup or they should show this and that as part of the contract. Why, when they buy the group stages of a Wednesday night game or Tuesday night games on Virgin Media or Wednesday or vice versa, whatever they are they not obliged to show their own team or their own sides in the qualifying rounds? And this week as well, obviously, and I understand that they might not have been able to show all of them, but in fairness, the Rovers game should have been shown and the Bows game. But that Rovers Champions League qualifier was 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's like the pinnacle of the European football, and neither leg was shown on TV, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that is a massive issue as well. And I think you've also got, I think, and to be fair to RT, there is obviously a lot of other TV channels
it's not just
operate
RT.
in the Irish market as well. But I think it's almost and I think, to be fair, Air for a couple of years kind of took it over, and was some really memorable games on it. But there was some also kind of memorable the way they progressed it, and the podcast they had, and different things like that, and the people they had on the shows. But it almost feels with them, and obviously they've gone into a difficult situation as well, and they, I think, see some broadcasting in the next few months. But it does kind of you're looking at it now going, who's going to take over? Because it's clear RTE and their way, and it's not just the League of Ireland that probably suffers from a lack of coverage. I think it's a lot of other sports, and maybe something we'll get into later in athletics and track and field. But you are looking at it going, like Andrew said, like it's such a huge week the last couple of days, and obviously what's happened with the Conference League has really helped the League of Ireland size, and I know a lot has been said by other countries and other clubs in top coefficient leagues, but what it's done for the League of Ireland, and you think it's some of the money the Bohemians and Dundalk and Rovers, and massively for Dundalk, who've kind of been going through a lull in the last couple of years, and the Dundalk fans not happy with their owner losing Chris Shields after 10 years of service. So for them in the last couple of years to have these results, it's just massive for them. And again, like with Dundalk, the coverage only kicked in for Dundalk when they got to the Europa League, and it was almost as if this was sort of something to latch onto. And fairness, RT covered a lot of their games in the Champions League qualifier last year. But for someone like Bows, I mean, this is kind of unbelievable stuff.
And Bows have serious potential as a club, don't they? And the stuff they're doing off the pitch. And we've talked about this before in the early days of the podcast, that they're a team that if you don't have a League of Ireland team and you live in Dublin, I wouldn't put you off supporting Bows. Do you know what I mean? And this is just, like you said, it's such a big week, for the biggest week they probably had since I can remember anyway.
Yeah, and everything in Bohemians has been trending in an upward direction, and obviously there's been a bit of a hoo-ha and over daily amount over recent years, and hopefully in the next few years that seems like it's going to get its redevelopment. You've also got the Talca Park issue for Shells to come as well, what happens with that. But Bohemians and everything like that, it does almost feel like they need, not their day in the sun, but they need to be rewarded, and the people behind the scenes in Bohemians do need to be rewarded. So it does feel, I'd say, if you're the likes of Daniel Lambert, who's high up there, it's probably a kick in the teeth, probably a kick in the guts, having this result, and still at the end of the week having this shadow that you probably aren't getting the coverage you deserve, and you probably aren't getting the level of detail in the coverage that you can really attract your different sponsorships from, and rewards the likes of Des Kelly that have been sponsoring Bohemians for years, and it almost does feel like a massive step forward for them, but also another stumbling block for them to get over. So I mean, like, you could sit and talk to any League of Ireland fan up and down the country, and they'll say this, the league's undersold in Ireland. I think a big problem RTE have, and I think a big problem few people have with it, is that it's not quite a national game in that sense. I mean, if you're living in Mayo, there isn't necessarily a club for you there, or you're living in parts of Clare or Kerry. So that definitely does seem like a bit of a stumbling block for it to truly grow. So I just hope that next week or whatever happens, that there is a bit of common sense, and at least one of the three games, because they're all massive second legs.
Yeah.
they're all very in the balance, and all three sides have got positive results. So it's all still to play for.
Yeah, like I think there's a bit of tide turning now, and I think tonight almost took the piss out of the TV. You know, the fact there were two incredible results for League of Ireland. Even the Rovers game, I was watching it or looking at it going, it's petering out to 0-0. The fact they got a last minute goal, 17-year-old. You know what I mean? It's kind of written. There's storylines there. Do you know what I mean? And it's similar. Like I look at like say ladies football and how that's grown over the years. And they were hardly shown on TV a few years ago. And, the likes of TG Carr came on board. They managed to organise a big events in Croke Park to get these sellout All-Ireland final days. And women's game is in growing, particularly in all sports, I think, in Ireland, but particularly in GAA. And the reason it's doing it is because it's starting to be shown and people are tuning in. Like I tuned into the Dublin Donegal game last Saturday, or was it on Bank Holiday Monday? Because it was on TV at a prime time, like 5 o'clock on Bank Holiday Monday. So why, there has to be a bit of that thought process going, we can't just give up on the League of Ireland because, we all support Premier League clubs and that's fine, but we're also not being shown these League of Ireland teams. And when we are, it's half-assed, as I said, on a Friday night. Soccer Republic, it's just on a terrible time. There's no, have it on at 9 o'clock before match of the day. And again, like you said, Sean, there's probably not enough TV channels. And in fairness, this can't just be an RTE bash. And the reason it kind of is because they are the public service broadcasting. Viewing figures shouldn't really come into it. And that's a point I'll get into athletics in a second, but there's other channels there as well. But RT, they have to be prioritised, and this is the biggest sport. You see the Irish national team, and we've the right man now in the helm, in my opinion, just to keep the League of Ireland at the forefront. It's up to other channels to be showing it. And again, if you get the UEFA Euro qualifiers to show Ireland, you should be able to show the Irish club team. So I think it's on UEFA, or RTE should be can we get these games for free, or Virgin Media or whatever when they get the rights. I did see that Virgin Media have the group stages for the Europa Conference League, so hopefully they can get some sort of deal to show the rest of the qualifiers, and then if any Irish team makes it, it does. But yeah, like you said, Sean, I haven't seen three Irish teams build on the momentum together. It's almost like the Bows result and the Bows being at the V has kind of spurred these teams on, and us on the outside forget their arch rivals. If you're a Rovers fan, do you really want Bows to win? But I do think there's good competitive nature there as well. So
yeah, well, I think it's all benefiting the league, but I do it. There is always that discussion.
Which is good.
It happens in every country. I mean, there's always that discussion in England. If you're do you want an opposite club or a rival club doing well in Europe? But definitely, I've seen very few interesting tweets and Facebook comments and stuff in forums. I mean, but
you don't mind that though, do you? It's a bit of
No, but and also I think if you're Dundalk and especially Dundalk and Bohemians, with probably where they are financially, I think Rovers are obviously a little bit more secure in the success they've had in recent years. But if you're Bohemians in Dundalk, and after Dundalk building on the success of last year, but really having a difficult period in the last 10 to 12 months, and what's happened with the manager and the managers, and what's happened with the owner, and losing someone like Chris Shields, and just different things happening around the ground. There wasn't that feel-good factor from what happened from the group stages. So for them to have that result tonight just probably kicks the can down the road and keeps them going. Well, if you're Bohemians, I mean, this is like money in the bank. This is just unbelievable for them, and it can not just build on what's happening on the field, but if you're in Bohemians, it's building all the success or off the field as well. And something that's been really impressive for them is the whole Bohemians brand, and their work in the inner city, and their work in the prison services and everything like that, and the culture they built around Bow. So it's definitely a massive couple of nights for them coming up as well. So it does feel like not a groundbreaking week because of all the trouble they're having with TV stuff, but it does feel like a massive shot in the arm for Irish football and League of Ireland football.
Yeah, we've a couple of more minutes on this before we move on, so get your comments in if you're watching on the live stream. We've got Des Gallagher from YouTube there saying League of Ireland should be worked on more as a brand that can be sold to people that live in the likes of Mayo, Kerry, Laois, Carlow, Meath, set up supporter groups in these counties. And I guess, and that's the point you made, Sean, but I guess this is stuff that the legacy of John Delaney and whoever else was running the show there. I think that's important to mention in this conversation, that he's a big part of this.
Yeah, massively. But I mean, if you're a kid in somewhere like Tralee now, with all the district stuff that they have at schoolboys at 13s, 15s, 17s, 19s, you're more connected with Irish football anyway because of the national leagues. and I know they just made a new head of the manager of the National Leagues. So it is massive for them, and there's a lot of great work going on. And I recommend anyone that there's an interview on Alan Cawley's podcast with the new head, Will Clark, who's actually local to us here. So it's a very good interview. We'll link it in the description. But still, as a 12-year-old in the likes of Mayo or Carlow or Laois or even Meath, you think of the population of Meath and Kildare, you're still not connected with your League of Ireland club, or that is a massive thing. And maybe the only way is watching a match of the day style game and picking your favorite player or different things, because there is players coming from these counties. You know, if you look at Dundalk side, they've players from Mayo and Meath, and they've had different players from around the country. So it's not like it's just different to this. You've got Gary O'Neill for Rovers, who's from Kerry, and so you have the players are coming from them, but necessarily they aren't getting well supported by people in those areas. So that's a massive thing, a massive problem. And that is probably the biggest problem they face, that there's probably up to around 15 counties in Ireland that probably don't have that League of Ireland infrastructure yet. And it is something to be worked on. And, you know, the examples that Des has listed there are, you know, 5 pretty big counties that if you've a club in one or two of them, and it's kind of hard because you don't want to necessarily grow the league, because you want to keep the strength in depth. But it is a massive problem for them, and obviously a legacy of what's happened over the last 15 years or so.
Well, and Sean, we obviously live right beside Camatidi, and we did speak of it at the time, going, well, we knew people involved with the Camatidi coming into the league, and it's brilliant. It's only up the road. Like Bray Wanderers were also up the road, and so were loads of other Dublin clubs. And there had to have been at that time some way for the FAI to get some other club in. We've had Kildare County, we've had Kilkenny City. Who Sean, name any other ones?
Monaghan United.
Jesus, yeah, and that Roddy Collins documentary is brilliant on Monaghan. His time over there, if you want to laugh, I think it's on YouTube. But that point is, we've had these clubs, not all those counties, like you said. I think Kerry's a massive one, Sean. I think Tralee and Killarney examples are pretty good. But yeah, look, let's see, can we eventually get, and Deds has another comment in here saying 93 days since RT have shown a live game, and I actually remember the stat he's referencing there, 2019, they went 109 days, and with it in the middle of the season, like it's crazy, isn't it, how these deals were allowed to happen from all parties, you know.
And the big thing with the League of Ireland, with the way the season is, that they have football in the summer months.
Yeah.
And it's a real USP of the League of Ireland, and it's probably not used enough, that there isn't. I think it's Sweden. Is it Sweden? There's one of the Scandinavian countries that makes an awful lot of money by running through the summer months, because if you look at all the top nations of their national leagues, they don't run through the summer, and that has to be something that the League of Ireland gets back to. And for that stat there, that Des is saying 109 days without a single League of Ireland game in the middle of the season, which is when there's no Premier League on, there's no Championship football in England, there's no other leagues really running simultaneously with it. That's when the League of Ireland has to get to the forefront, and that's when it has to attack that younger demographic of people. And it probably hasn't penetrated that enough, really. And like, even small things, and I've spoken to a few people on it, like this idea that it runs through the main part of the season, and that should be the key stage of the season, and that should be when, you know, the League of Ireland is at the forefront of everyone. And it's had a couple of those nights, whether it be a Rovers Dundalk game for the league, or going back to when it was Dundalk and Cork going for the league title, and there was that rivalry. It did have a few of those nights in the summer where Turner's Cross was heaving with people down there, or Oriel Park, and certainly when there was the likes of Shawnee Maguire, Darragh Horgan, Richie Tell. But it does seem to have eased off that a little bit more, and it's just not happening. And hopefully when crowds do get back to full capacity, we do see maybe an uplift in attendances. I know attendances pre-COVID were really heaving as well, but I do think if you can get that atmosphere first and foremost back to it, I think a lot of this stuff might necessarily follow. But yeah, I mean, it's a staggering stat for the national broadcaster to go 109 days without showing, you know, the premier men's football competition in Ireland, when there's nothing else on, really.
Yeah, and for you, out of the 3 games, what side impressed you the most? What side can you see going
Well,
through?
well, I think Bows have to what
It's a
they've done to go.
tough to go away now and get the.
Yeah, and to concede that goal kind of late on the
Mm.
game's a bit of a killer as well. And
Just for
like,
people that might not be aware, there's no away goal, so it's not as big a blow. But like you said, Sean, 2 goal lead.
yeah, and,
Gone.
and also with I wonder if tiredness comes into it, and if because they have been on this journey for the last couple of weeks, and the Aviv has been absolutely bouncing with the atmosphere, and you've seen the red and black colour around Dublin. I'm just wondering, is it a bridge too far? Hopefully, it's not. I know a few people. I know someone who's trying to get his flights booked for Greece. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a red and black army descending on Greece. But hopefully, I'd like to see them probably more than Dundalk and Rovers, because they've all both of them have had their success in the last couple of years, where it does feel like Bows having lost a lot of players in recent years. You think of Danny Grant going to Huddersfield, even the likes of Dylan Watts going, leaving, Danny Mandrew leaving to go to Rovers. It would be an unbelievable achievement for Keith Long and Trevor Crowley, because what they've done over the last few years and where they started from, and even the start of this season. I mean, there was they had a really poor start to the season, and they were really struggling. And I think they had a really good month. Georgie Kelly started banging in the goals, and they've been on that journey from then. So I'd love to see Bows go through.
Yeah, same. I think it'll be great, and it's gonna be some week next week. I personally think someone will come on board. I wouldn't even rule out a late TG Carr, some sort of wild bid there. They do. And the reason I never mentioned them into these conversations, I think they punch way above their weight. The fact they show horse racing GA, and I think for them, with the limited budget they have, they do a phenomenal job as well. So I wouldn't be dissing them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they came on board in some capacity. But again, with UEFA, it's probably a very tough thing to come on board if you're not RT or Virgin Media, who have the rights for the group stages. But anyway, for those listening that were listening on the live stream there at Tackling the Sport, you can get us on social media, and the podcast is available in full in case you missed any bits on the League of Ireland bits. The reason I'm saying that, we're just going to move on to the athletics, because this is something I wanted to cover tonight, Sean, mainly because the Olympics kind of front and center. I'd say this time next week we'll all kind of move on with our lives in some way, but what always frustrated me about the Olympics, and we had the late Jerry Kiernan on, and for those that know him, he's always been a big miss in RT's panel, and we did an interview with him about a year ago, and he taught both myself and Sean at St. Bridget's Boys School, and something he was always very passionate about was the lack of coverage from athletics in this country, particularly outside Olympics. So, for example, like he would say, and he said in the podcast, and like, you won't get too big a GA man than myself and Sean, but we both kind of agreed, and don't want to put words in your mouth, Sean, but like, when you're showing a Wicklow club game or a Wexford club game or whatever they're showing on RTE, semi-finals, quarterfinals now in counties, yet we can't show the Irish cross country championships live on TV. And I watched the Irish national championships, which were on not too long after Jerry was on the podcast, Sean, and their coverage was like an hour on Saturday, an hour on Sunday, and that was it. So like, we're not giving athletics the platform to showcase its talent. We're getting onto like, obviously Phil Healy made a couple of headlines, but aside from that, like, you're following these athletes every 4 or 5 years, just getting their story 5 minutes before the race starts in the Olympics, and then you don't hear about them for 4 or 5 years. And it's not the athletes' fault; they're competing in these events. We're just not showing athletics in this country, and we've a great opportunity now with like lockdown and the fact that people are starting to do a lot more running. Like, even driving around, like, the amount of people running is ridiculous. So all of a sudden, if people are running 5Ks, you're more likely to tune into a 5K race to see how it's going and see the times and see how far away you really are. So I'm just kind of sick of like us just forgetting about athletics and not showing it throughout the year. Like, the World Championships are barely covered on RT when they are. Again, it's like the League of Ireland. It's like half-assed when they do it outside Olympics. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Sean, just in those couple of points.
Yeah, like it is probably right. I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of sports that are undersold in recent years, and prior to what happened to the women's hockey team, people in hockey would have said they didn't get the coverage they deserved. And certainly, you look at other sports, you've the likes of cricket, boxing at the moment, potentially not the coverage, but everything that's happening. Ireland can't host major boxing fights, which is an absolute killer to the boxing industry and all the good work that's been done and has been done over the last 12, 13 years. You go back to Beijing when there was a heap of medals won. So it's not easy in that sense. But definitely athletics. I mean, it's like everything. I mean, when you've an athlete that comes around like a Usain Bolt or a Mo Farah or someone like that, where they completely dominate the whole sport, if you like, the whole industry. I mean, everyone knew who the fastest man in the world was for all those years. Everyone knew who Usain Bolt was, yet they might necessarily knew anything else about the sport, about athletics. And that often can be a problem. It really can be a problem for a sport. But the thing with athletics is I do feel like it's if Ireland truly did have a, not being harsh on any of the athletics or at the athletes, because they're obviously world class athletes to get to that stage. But if Ireland truly had a real medal candidate or a world champion 400-meter runner or whatever it is, which would be so hard for Ireland to produce, naturally I think the coverage would be more. But I
would that coverage be more throughout the years in between Olympics? Like,
yeah, I think it would.
Thomas Barr came fourth in
the
Olympics 2016. I don't think we had a great way of showing his story for the last 4 years, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
and again, it's RTE. Like, it doesn't have to be viewership. You're the public service broadcasters,
What I probably mean by that, I mean, if it was a gold medal or something like that, that's what I'm hinting at. But I do agree. You've someone like Thomas Barr who missed out on a medal by 0.100 of a second or something it was in Rio. I think again you could look at a sport like rowing and say, look, for the world championships that we've won in rowing in the last couple of years, we haven't had the coverage.
I would say there was a small bit of coverage for when Paul
won.
I suppose, but overall, obviously.
But I mean, that's what you could harbour a point at. So I think what ultimately happens with Ireland, because we're such a small nation and there isn't a lot of TV channels or independent radio stations or whatever it is to cover it. If you're a journalist, you have to almost piggyback your way to get to a world championships, because the interest necessarily mightn't be there and mightn't sell as many papers or whatever it is, and there is a lot of great work done by journalists in different sports, to certainly, I don't like the term minority sports, but on sports that maybe don't have the coverage they deserve. So we've had at the start of our podcast, Dan, we had a lot of people on from those smaller sports, the judos, we cricketers on, people from a range of those. Yeah, touch rugby. So it is hard for them to prosper. I do think, like, I've heard a few really interesting points, and obviously not necessarily on coverage, but on funding. I do think there could be more done when you see when the sport capital grants come out, and it's a lot to kind of, if it's a GA club or a rugby club or a football club, a boxing club, whatever. I do think there could be more spent on communal amenities with community-based activities, certainly in your pockets of Ireland that probably don't have the funding needed, and almost to try and help produce more and more athletes from different sports, as opposed to focusing a lot of funding in a rural GA club or a rural football club, where money that could be spent based on a shared community facility could benefit more Irish sport as opposed to a particular sport. So there is a lot of stuff, from funding to coverage to how our preparation and facilities, which at the moment I think there's a lot of emphasis based on Abbottstown for a range of sports. I mean, that's the Irish sport, or Sport Ireland's headquarters, and they do a brilliant job there. But if you're struggling to get from Westport down for training, there is a level of difficulties with these all, and it is just hard. And I think with the Olympics, because it's so big, it heightens everything. And of course, for 3 or 4 weeks, that the whole news agenda is Olympics, and everyone goes Olympic mad. And hopefully with Kelly Harrington, we could get 2 golds, and to think you could have 2 gold medals in a summer Olympics for Ireland is unbelievable.
One at the
And
start, one at the end,
yeah,
perfect symmetry. Yeah.
and probably after a month,
Hmm.
if you went down the street and asked, can you name the three people who got the goals? You'd get an awful lot who would forget. So
We
there
should
is
have
that.
some sort of, maybe, I don't know, road to Olympics, or build it up in some way, that, and maybe the interest just isn't there. Like, one person, like, my opinion, and like, I don't know. I just feel like like we don't hear enough about these athletes until we get to the games, or, like I said, like Mona McSherry. I think she won a 2017 junior world championship, and I actually remember sitting watching RG News in the gaff and seeing that she won a junior world championship, and I was like, Jesus, that's incredible. And I actually, in my head, I hadn't heard of her until the Olympics started, and maybe that's me not following swimming enough, but it wasn't on my feed or on my TV. Now, I subsequently saw that she actually ended up winning silver, I think, in a European event, or she medaled at a European event. But the point is, and she had a few bad injuries, in fairness, but like, we're not hearing about that, or I'm not seeing a million Mona McSherry interviews, on the front page of the Sunday papers. You know what I mean? And again, like the point you made a few minutes ago, Sean, on journalists and coverage, in fairness, like, they need to get the coverage that's going to get the most clicks or the most views on articles or podcasts, and that's obviously fair enough. But I don't know, we need to have some sort of road to Olympics, or some sort of way to build these athletes' stories, so people know a lot more about them, that it's kind of like on your mind constantly. But I guess it is kind of hard. It does get lost in the sports bubble, particularly with Premier League and Championship kicks off, and it does seem to get lost. And maybe that's nobody's fault, but maybe the grants should be better, maybe the coverage should be better. But I do think, again, if you're covering Olympics, there should be something in the contract as RTE to say that you have to show the national cross country championships. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And look, I think with coverage comes a lot of funding and sponsorship, and a lot of these athletes, Sport Ireland are taking gambles on them financially. You've got, private sponsorship or whatever it is, and maybe coverage could help that and could really change that. But look, I do agree. Maybe the interest isn't quite there for a lot of this. It is hard to know. It's just, there is a lot going on in the sport world. Come February now, we'll have the Six Nations, which is every year. You've got the Premier League, the Champions League, Ireland men's and women's football and rugby internationals. You've got the GA season. Every 4 years, you have the Olympics. Every 2 years, of football major tournament. So, it stacks up, and there is so much sport to watch, and a lot. I suppose it is hard to cover an awful lot of it. I I think I think a lot of it as well probably comes with the Olympics, with the coverage. A lot of it comes with the timing of with Tokyo and them being 8 hours ahead of us, and you think of some of the difficulties with where, because it's a global sport, with things like that coming into it. But yeah, it's a hard one to put a finger on. I would be really interested to see what happens, because it's a 3-year cycle now to the next Olympics. What happens with Paris? Is there a difference, with someone like Kelly Harrington? Hopefully she wins her gold. How does that journey happen? So all that, I think, would be a little bit more interesting. And I do think if Ireland do get 2 gold medals, that you have that little bit more of a feel-good factor coming into it. And like you said, having 1 gold medal at the start of games, 1 at the end, maybe just builds it up slightly.
Yeah. And it's actually a good point Tim makes, in fairness, that we haven't brought up yet. Like Tim Stokes on YouTube, and keep your comments coming in, and we're just going to talk about this for a few more minutes. I think athletics has an awful reputation over the years due to doping scandals, and a lot has been done to clear this up. Yeah, and I guess that will always kind of, similar to cycling and the Tour de France, will always kind of hover over sport. But I mean, I don't think you'd get better TV for anyone who hasn't watched it the minute of just watching both the men's and the women's 400-meter hurdles. Like, incredible races, and in a 1-minute clip on social media, you can watch those races. Do you know what I mean? And I always think like horse racing is pretty big in this country. It gets a lot of funding in this country, and it's great to watch. And when I'm watching either hurdle races or even like 1500 meters, Sean, I'm thinking in my horse racing brain, you don't want to get boxed in there. You don't want to go on the outside. So straight away, I think there's anybody's interest in horse racing and just loves watching horse racing and the tactics of it, not just the betting, but the tactics and where you should be. to have a runner there, I think is even like 4 or 5 times more thrilling, because you don't have a jockey doing it. You know what I mean? It's a runner. And like, I've seen athletes get boxed in. I actually saw an athlete stay on the inside, and do you wait for the gap to appear? What do you do? Do you take them around the bend? There's so much tactics that if you're given time on a broadcast, on a World Championships to talk about, maybe it might drum up a bit more interest. But again, when RT have the Europeans and have the national Worlds, and they also have the Irish Championships, they only show an hour. Do you know what I mean? So like, if it's on at 7 to 8, most people are going to miss it. Just, it's only on an hour. So I think if we can just like, and we've great panelists on, like Sonia's brilliant to listen to, Daryl's brilliant to listen to, Rob Heffernan's brilliant to listen. You know what I mean? There's a good athletics team there. They're just not given the opportunity to sell the sport a bit more, I guess, and to, really talk about it outside Olympic times. I think it's just the frustrating thing for me. And the one thing you can't say about athletics is, like, it's like football in the sense you can just, it's so easy. Like straight away, right, you've got to get from A to B. It's the most simple of sports. And from there, you can kind of learn the kind of tactics and, why is there slow paces in 5,000 meters and 10,000 meter finals in these big tournaments. There's a lot there, and I'm starting to get into it more. I just hope that, like, I think I always threaten to do this, and I just kind of peter away, and maybe I need to focus on it a bit more myself, but in terms of watching it, but there's not enough coverage that it's not front and center all the time. And these athletes, like, their interviews are amazing. Like, they don't speak like soccer players. They don't speak like GAA players that are just kind of drummed in. We don't want to give too much away. They're just so, like, brilliant. Like, Phil Eady's a brilliant speaker. They're all brilliant speakers, Mona McSherry, and that there's so much there. There's stories there to be told of these athletes outside the 5 minutes before Olympic start, that it just frustrates me a bit,
Well, I think Tim makes an excellent point there about doping. I think that's a major turn off for a lot of people. And even, like, I know that there are Russian athletes competing under a different umbrella, but it was only when I saw it earlier where I think it was the 400 or the pole vault winners were taking their photo, and the English or the British athlete there with the Union Jack, the American athlete with the American flag, and then you had the Russian athlete with just the Russian Olympic Committee flag, and you just
council, I think, but
or whatever. Yeah, you just feel like you're being almost cheated in that sense as well. And I definitely think athletics has a major problem with it. That they just can't seem to find a way of combating, and there always seems to be some sort of scandal. In Ireland have had their own Olympic scandals with doping or whatever it is. So it is a difficult position. But like I said, hopefully with the 3 years to Paris, and it being so close, and Ireland, like I said, having a pretty good games to win 2 gold medals in one meeting. Hopefully Kelly Harrington could get over the line. The story of her and what she's done, I think, would be brilliant.
Yeah, for the inner city, like, it's amazing. And I remember listening to Kelly at a second captain's just after she won her World Championship medal, so it would have been 2018 Christmas time, and geez, I was amazed by her story. And the fact I was there that night instead of the other 3 nights meant I was so much more aware of Kelly Harrington, so I had kept an eye on making sure. And she had a terrible injury, I think 2019. I think if Tokyo happened last year, I don't think it would have happened, for put it that way. So I think the fact that she's had that extra year, it's just a brilliant story. And for those that haven't listened to her family be interviewed yet, like, your brother speaks absolutely amazingly. A couple of last things, a comment from Barry Doyle there from Champ TV: we need to create our own TV channel, that's Trump TV. And there you go. Like, and again, like, it's on us as well to cover these sports too. I guess it is very easy to kind of go down the Premier League route, Sean, and it is, but again, like, you do want to get people tuning in. So I guess at a smaller scale, we're probably guilty of it ourselves as well. I guess it's trying to find that balance between covering the main sports, like, and it's tough. I guess you can't cover everything.
Yeah, but like I said, I think sometimes within an Olympics you need a spark, and Rio was really disappointing in a lot of ways, especially on the boxing side of it. And Irish boxing has gone through the ring in the last 6-7 years, and everything that's happened and everything that continues to happen and is coming out more and more into the public domain about outside influences. So for someone like Kelly Harrington with her story to win a gold medal at that stage of the Olympics as well, I think would just put the icing on the cake for Ireland. And you got to remember as well, I only just thought of it there. there was obviously the scandal around Rio with the OCI and Pat Hickey, so it almost felt like they weren't helping themselves as well. Yeah, but I mean that's probably a story for another day.
No, and I do listen to the coverage. Like there does seem to be. I always got the sense that these Irish athletes were winning in spite of the system, and I kind of went into listening to coverage with that kind of thought process. But listen to like people that know a lot more about me, like from Sonia and stuff like that, saying these are well trained, these have been well coached. She was even saying we need to move more athletes to the 3,000 meter steeplechase. You've a better chance of final, stuff like that. But she says the things like that are starting to happen. But and even small things like Phil Healy's competing in all these events. It's incredible. Like 3 events on the track now. Again, Sonia said that maybe she should rein that in a bit to 2 or 1, but she'll learn and it's an experience. But like I said, let's hope in Paris 2024, there's 3 years, not just for the athletes, but for us, it's a lot more easier to get engaged, and we'll try and bring the coverage as best we can. But thanks, Mil, for tuning in. If you're listening live at Tackling Sports social media, it would mean the world to us if you do subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And do let us know what you want us to cover as well. We're definitely open to that. And contradicting the last 46 minutes there, we're going to be tuning into a Premier League preview coming your way at some point next week. And we're working to get Andrew Blair White, the Aston Villa fan, amongst the Shamrock Rovers fans, to kind of in get involved with the show. But I guess the last thing to say is the Olympics. It's so many different sports. See a final comment there from Barry Doyle saying he enjoyed the diving Tuesday, Wednesday morning with my morning coffee. The cycling was a bit of a disappointment. The Olympics is great, and I think it is a one-off event where you can kind of get down a rabbit hole of watching Olympic handball. I was watching water polo for a few minutes today. Absolute outrageous sport, incredible to watch. I really want to be a goalkeeper, one of them. So it is one of those one-off events. But listen, Sean, thanks a mil for joining me.
Cheers, Dan.
And if you're listening, have a great weekend. Thanks a mil for tuning in, and we'll be back on.
Take care.